BLOCKCHANCE 2021.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. After that amazing video, it's going to be hard to keep the bar that high, but we'll try. So today, I wanted to talk to you about sort of our view about crypto asset custody. The people before me came today, talked about how the crypto world needs to sort of step up and get more institutionalized, and things like crypto custody will become increasingly important as more and more enterprises and institutions enter the market and start dealing in this arena. So this is where it all starts. In the middle of all these sort of tech buzzwords, this is sort of the underlining pinning technology of blockchain, public and private key. Everything starts from here. Basically, probably we all know your address, your account, your equivalent of an IBAN comes from your private key, which essentially is something that looks like that, which probably nobody is able to remember. But one of the main things or important things that the crypto world has brought with it is that who controls this key basically owns the crypto. So this is the key, which means that it becomes increasingly important to safely store and manage your key or keys. And this, although it sounds obvious, still today, although it sounds obvious, it's not really always taken seriously, and we'll see some examples of what's been done today, what we can do today, and also our approach to this topic. So why do we want to save our private key and keep it safe? Well, essentially to protect it from our purple Mr. Robot here, which, as we know, there's a lot of value in crypto, which means that where there's value, also hackers will be there, and as the value increases, the more resources will be put into actually accessing these resources. So it becomes, as we said, increasingly important to safely manage and store these private keys, because compared to traditional finance and financial products, when you do a transaction on a blockchain, it's gone. It's irreversible. It's too late. Once you realize, it's gone. And as we mentioned before, the ownership of that crypto is essentially defined by who can sign a transaction with a private key. The blockchain just says yes, the private key is correct, that account is yours. Pretty simple, pretty powerful at the same time, but potentially very risky and very dangerous. So I would say there's two macro areas, or let's say ways in which certainly individuals, but in general, that you can go about protecting your keys. One is self-custody. Probably in most cases perfect if you're an individual. So you can manage it yourself. Of course, there's complexities, technological complexities, but also there's risks involved. If you are the holder of your own key, manage it yourself, the responsibilities are yours. You lose it, as we know, if you lose a key, it's gone. There's nobody to go and knock on their door and say, please, can I get my crypto back? You lose the key, it's gone. Or, of course, same goes, we mentioned our sort of our purple hacker before. Of course, you can be subject to hacks. Or, even if you are probably a bit, let's say, rarer as an occurrence, but even if you're just an individual, if you have enough, let's say, assets, you could be subject to internal fraud, family members, friends, if they get hold of your key. As we said before, it's a bit like cash. You get a $100 bill, once you have it in your hand, it's mine. Or, especially for institutions and enterprise, of course, self-custody is not really an option. And so we go into the sphere of third-party custody. So we want to give it to somebody else that they can hold it for us. But, of course, even this has some, this solution has some risks associated to it. Or all of you probably have read more than one piece of news over the recent and also recent years about hacks, keys being stolen. So definitely there's a potential threat there. If we give all our, or delegate all of our, all the responsibility to a third party, they of course can be hacked, or they themselves can be subject to internal fraud. It's happened before. If I have, just for sake of argument, if a provider, let's say, of custody holds all the keys for their customers, somebody at some point could get greedy and say, okay, we have the keys, I have the assets, and so that's something else we have to protect ourselves from. Or, quite rare, but has happened, the actual provider is a fraud, or a bit happen a bit more often. It could go bust, and we've once again read more than once that people have lost access to their wallets because they could not recover the keys anymore. So essentially, whatever solution we look at, we have to deal with threats coming from the outside. Hacking is the first example, but also threats coming from the inside. So these are some of the, let's say, mitigating ways or mitigations that have been generally put in place to deal with some of this situation. First one, I saw a lovely private key before. One technique is to split it. I have a key, I split it into pieces, give it to different people. But at some point, at least with secret sharing, that key has to come back together. So essentially, we still have one key, which is then joined. So at some point, we'll have a whole key that needs to be joined up to do those transactions, and potentially somebody gets hold of that key. Once again, they have access to those assets, so potential point of failure. Client-side hardware, in that case, we're mostly talking about HSMs. For those who don't know what a HSM is, it's well, we've got one there in the picture. They come in the form of USB keys. They basically hold keys, the specialized hardware to hold keys. Said before, from an individual point of view, that's of course a great solution. If you're an institution on its own, it's probably not enough because you have policies. We'll see later some other options, but having just a single key that I hand to somebody is not a solution. If you're simple example, if you're a company, who are you going to give it to? Your CTO, your CFO, you're going to put it in a safe. Things start becoming a bit complicated. Another option was called cold wallet or cold storage. That's a picture of a mountain. Companies provide physical bunkers in which you can print out, in some cases, print out your keys, form a QR code, put it in a safe under a mountain. Great. Nobody can go hold of it. A hacker definitely cannot get hold of it because it's not online, but probably not so easy to then access your crypto because you have to physically go and get it. If you then have to cater for multi-sig or environments with more signatures, it just doesn't become very feasible. Of course, we can store keys on the server. Classic example, some exchanges will have keys. You access your wallet in reality with username and password. Your key is stored there. We've seen more than once that, of course, if you have a place where keys are stored, it's a sort of honeypot. It's begging for somebody to come there and try and get hold of them. Bitcoin has a built-in multi-sig. We know multi-sig wallets exist, specific to that protocol, and also are not very, very scalable. If I want to have a multi-sig protocol with 5, 7, or 10, it becomes, doesn't handle it very well, doesn't scale well at all, and also mentioned it's specific to Bitcoin, so already if I want to use different cryptocurrencies, different blockchains, I have to find anyway another solution. Or we have air-gap devices, which are somewhere, let's say, in between of cold wallets and sort of client hardware. The idea is you have a machine which is completely disconnected from the internet. And normally what will happen is you get your transaction, you download it, take it physically with a USB stick or something on another machine that's not on the internet, so nobody can access it, sign a transaction, get it, take it back, upload it, and so on and so forth. Of course, this can work as well, but we can see that the process is a bit lengthy to be able to complete a transaction. So, are there alternatives? Well, of course, there are alternatives, and this is sort of our take on what we see as a good solution to overcome some of the potential problems with what we've seen so far. And I have a short video, maybe, to show you how our system sort of works. So the idea, our video goes quite fast, but don't worry, I'll sort of go over it again later, in which we've seen sort of n key holders. So the idea is that you create groups of people that have keys, so they're all key holders, and they basically participate in a ceremony, a key creation ceremony, where essentially using something called threshold signature schemes, which is sort of multi-party computation cryptography, keys are generated all at the edge. So every user will have its keys in a HSM, and the keys, though, are never leave the client. So they never send to the server, they never ever leave the client. So basically there's never one single key. This is a specific thing of threshold signatures keys, which basically create what we call key shares, which means we see them here in the picture. In this case, we had 5 key holders. Each one has a partial, but we don't put them all together, ever. Basically, they are individually used. When you set up a group, you also set up a threshold. That's where the name, signature threshold key, comes from. So let's say we have 5. We can define a threshold of 3. We can define a threshold of 4. And that means that at least 3 keys need to sign a transaction individually. And then, and this is the part of sort of cryptography which really becomes magic, if 3 people or the threshold amount of people sign this transaction and we send it to the blockchain, it's actually validated as a valid transaction, as if it had been signed by one single private key. But we never have that single key. So exactly when we sign, the keys remain exactly where they are, and in this example, in the image, we have 3 participants as a threshold, but it could be any combination of numbers. When the user sign, the transaction is validated by the blockchain, as if it had been signed with just a standard private key. The good thing, or some of the advantages of such a solution, first is just a mention of the type of cryptography, multi-party computation. Very simple terms, means multi-parties, so we have multiple parties working at the same time. We don't have a single element, server, or whatever, which is doing the cryptography, but it's a joint effort between multiple parties. We've added client-side hardware, we mentioned, so USB keys that work together to hold the keys, and the possibility of potentially creating any combination of, technically, often we refer to N of M groups, which means I could have 7 key holders and 5 as a threshold, 8 key holders and 3 as a threshold, depending on the situation. And for every wallet I have, I could have a different configuration, I could have a different group set. And in the example in the image, although any combination is possible, we encourage, when we set up groups, to try and split, and that's one of the reasons for the title of the speech, try and split between different entities the responsibility. So going back to the title of sharing responsibility, so that no entity on their own can actually perform a transaction. So just for the sake of argument, if we see the picture, we have 5 key holders. 2 of on the bottom have a sort of different logo. They represent, for example, a custody provider. So you have the customer who's giving you the cryptos to hold on to, and the provider. If we have 2 keys on the provider side and 3 on the customer, and for example, we set a threshold of 4, essentially what we're doing is no single entity, customer or provider, can actually perform a transaction without the other. The customer will need at least 1 from the provider, because 3 + 1, 4. And if I'm the provider of the custody service, I will need at least 2 signatures from the client. Of course, this could be good for some situations. In other, I might want to do 3-2, 3-1, 2-2. Depending on the situation, I can create all kinds of combinations. Another very important thing, which sort of mentioned before, the keys are not in one single place. They're all distributed. So there's no honeypot to go and to attack. A hacker, if they wanted to attack the system, would have to get hold of at least the threshold number of signatures, which are individually stored in different hardware, which potentially physically are in different places in the world, which makes it, nothing's impossible, but much harder. Actually, to protect that even more, we're also allowed to create a sort of encrypted environment from which to run the local application, which sort of makes it much harder for, let's say, malware or software to run in an unprotected environment, because it's all encrypted and every application is whitelisted. And also networking, IPs and URLs are whitelisted, so only what's allowed will be executed. This can give an even extra level of security and control over who has access to the system and who can actually sign transactions. Also, because actually the whole of the TSS process happens off-chain, so all the cryptography doesn't happen on the blockchain. From the blockchain point of view, if it's a Bitcoin address, if it's an Ethereum address, or whatever you're using, it's just it's a normal address. But with multisig, you might know that if you look at a multisig address on an Explorer, you immediately see how many keys it has, 3, 5, or whatever, because it's actually part of the address. With threshold signatures, the address is just a normal address, so even the blockchain doesn't know how many keys actually we have behind it, how many other key holders, how many other participants. And of course, because it's off-chain, it can be applied potentially to any blockchain or any DLT, because essentially you're working at sort of signature level, private key level, rather than on the blockchain. Another use case, which, apart from the obvious, let's say, of protecting crypto assets, which we found interesting and started to work on, is the fact that automatically, using a system which uses TSS, if we deploy a smart contract using such a protocol, immediately, without having to change anything in a smart contract, immediately you have a shared responsibility of, normally, depending on what smart contract it is, but it's quite common for smart contracts to have owner, let's say, functions that can only be accessed by who's deployed it. So immediately, you're adding that extra layer of shared responsibility and security without having to change anything at all on the smart contract. Because let's say you deploy it with a group of 3 key holders and a threshold of 2 to, I don't know, mint a new token or to do any other operation. Immediately, you need approval of at least 2 people, and you don't have to add another smart contract or modify the smart contract in any way. It basically happens off-chain, and no change needs to be done at all at the smart contract level. So that's all. Thank you. Went probably a bit faster than expected, but if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. If not, you're welcome to visit us at our booth downstairs. We're here with our Departure Hover tour. Okay. Evening, everybody's dead. I think it's here.
Thank you, Aldo. And Aldo is going to be one of our panelists at 6 p.m. And we have a short break till the next speech.
BLOCKCHANCE 2021.